As an occupational therapist, I often work with children who are struggling to learn how to write their name. Today, I want to break down my 3-step process for teaching children how to write their name that is no fuss, really engaging and playful, and will have your child writing their name in no time. So this first step that we want to take is to help our child learn to recognize their name. Within a preschool setting, this often happens really naturally because there is that name tag written on so many places, whether it's where they hang their bag or their sitting place or whatever it is, their name shows up a lot. So you can start to introduce this at home as well. Another thing that I like to do is have a piece of paper where you have different names set up, written on the paper, and you can help your child to try to identify which is their name on that paper. You can have this as a worksheet kind of setup, or even have it at the breakfast table as they are waiting for you to pour their cereal or whatever's going on, that they could engage in something like this. You could also do it with names that are on Post-its and written throughout the house, that they have to go and find the ones that are their name and leave the ones that are not their name. Similarly, you could cut out names and have them spread around the floor and let your child put their name on one side and every other name or every other word on the other side. This is helping your child to recognize the whole word of their name. Now, the second step is when we recognize each individual letter. While we can start with name recognition activities when our children are quite young, I would say generally around age 3 and up, children start to be more ready for learning each of the individual letters of their name. And I do want to just point out that this is quite different from teaching handwriting, because a name is so personal to a child, and because actually there's a lot of activities that they are writing their name generally within a preschool or kindergarten or school setting. So even before we really start working on writing and reading specifically, we do want to get that name just being introduced. Again, this is just them learning to write their name. So some of the practices that we might put in place when we are actually teaching handwriting, and I'll link above a video that I did all about handwriting, we wouldn't necessarily do here, because we're just wanting them to be able to have that kind of signature. And even for children that are struggling, I say, write the first letter of your name. If you can get that down, it feels like their signature that they're putting on a paper. So instead of feeling really intimidated by writing out the whole name, they have at least one point that they can put down on a paper and feel like confident in that. So the name that we're going to be talking about today is Ben. It's a nice, easy name, and actually as letters go in terms of learning, Ben is one of the easiest names to do because all of the letters are kind of in the same group that we learn handwriting, so they all kind of start in the same place, which is really helpful for children. If you have a child that has a longer name, I want you just to take note that it will take longer for them to learn. So children that have these nice little short names, they often get it a little bit quicker. I know one of my children has a nice 6-letter name, and it's hard to learn all of those 6 letters. So if the name starts with an easier letter, it's also going to be just a bit of a quicker process. All of this just to say, don't worry or feel discouraged if your child isn't learning to write their name as quick as somebody else. These small nuances in how their name is spelled can make quite a difference. So today we are going to be using the simplest name there is, Ben, in terms of writing. It's really an easy one. And when we start to, now they've recognized their name as a whole, now we're wanting to work on them recognizing individual letters, we want to give them lots of opportunities to see those letters and then to start organizing the letters together. So you can use things like these loose parts that your child can, you can jumble them up and let your child organize them in their actual name formation. I also really like using popsicle sticks. You just write the letters on the popsicle stick. And again, you can mix these all up and then get them to organize the letters according to their name. Now I'm going to try to organize this on the camera. See how confusing it is for me because of the switched angle. But this kind of activity of getting them to just not actually write, but organize where each letter is in the name is really helpful. I also have these cards, and we're going to go into a minute why I use this type of card specifically and why it's so helpful. But I do have these linked below. If you are in that stage where you are learning name writing, handwriting, you can come and grab these cards. They are very, very helpful in different stages of learning handwriting. But you can take these kind of loose parts or cards and get your child again to organize their name in the correct order. And by this, they are getting a kind of sense of each individual letter. While we're in this stage, we're also wanting them to understand the shapes that make up a letter. You see, we often think of handwriting or learning one's name as just a memory task. But if you look down at what processes are actually working in terms of child development, that a child would be able to write their name, one of the biggest components is the organization. So knowing where to start, where to end, how much space does this letter take up? That is why I like to teach names in capital letters. This is not something that everybody agrees on, so it's okay if your child's school or if you are choosing to not use capital letters throughout the name. That's also fine. I do find that they're just a little bit easier for kids to grasp, and it is like the first step that we take with handwriting. But I want to show you how we would also use something like Play-Doh, such a simple toy, to use these cards in order for your child to learn the shapes that make up the letters. So I'll just take a piece of Play-Doh and roll it out into a snake. And then, as you can see on these cards, they are marked according to the place that your child would start when they're writing. So they would start at number 1. This is really important because one of the ways that we're not just teaching them how to organize the letter in space, but we're also activating your child's motor memory or your child's muscle memory. So every time that they write the shape, we want that they do it in the exact same way so it becomes really a habit. It becomes something that they don't even think about. Just like now today when you get in your car and you start reversing or driving, it's just very natural, the mechanics of how you move your arms and your feet together. But when you started driving, it didn't feel that way. And that's where muscle memory really comes into play and is a huge part of handwriting. So we want to focus on then getting the handwriting, starting in the correct place and ending in the correct place, and that's developing a pattern. That's specifically why I don't like to do dot to dots. These are not actually dot to dots. These are for use otherwise. And because children then often just start in any place in the letter without actually building that muscle memory. So here we would take the Play-Doh snake and we would just put it on the shape of number 1, and then they would do the shape of number 2, and then number 3, and so on, and doing this with each letter. This can also be done, this kind of understanding of the shape can also be done with salt trays. So you would use the same card, put it in a tray with some salt or some rainbow rice on top, and let your child scrape through their name following the number sequence. I also like doing this with sandpaper type letters. So you can use the same kind of pattern and cut it out of sandpaper if you don't have the sandpaper letters at home, or you can even use like a foam or felt and just cut out the shape. And by this, we're teaching our child, before we even get to a pen, the kinesthetic understanding of the shape of the letter. So again, if we have it in felt or sandpaper or whatever it is, we're again like just using your finger to trace that shape. So we're all focusing on recognizing the name, recognizing the letters, and then having that kinesthetic understanding of the shape of the letter. And once you have passed that stage and you feel like your child is consistently starting in the right place, that they seem to understand the shape of their name, then we can get to the third and final stage, which is actually now getting a pen and writing their name. Just like we focused in those first 2 steps on really understanding the shape and the sequence of writing their name or each letter of their name, we're going to be doing that when we actually write the name. So how I like to start is to get a piece of paper and kind of cut out squares, just like these, squares or rectangles, just like these. The actual shape designation is really going to help your child to learn the correct pattern and learn the sizing of the letter. Often what we see is that children start writing and the first letter starts up here and the second letter is down there, and there's kind of not only a lack of order, but there's no kind of line. And you can understand that because we haven't provided for our children a way to organize where they write. Starting off with something like this pays off huge. It is such a game changer when it comes to learning handwriting. This is what we do when children are struggling with handwriting, but if you can start like this from the beginning, it's going to make all the difference in your child's understanding of how to use writing. So we have these squares, and each square would be for a letter. And then you can do dots if you want to. I would recommend not doing like full dots for them to just trace over, but maybe like the number 1 dot. So I'm just going to show you on the card. Like if you're using these cards, you could do the dot for number 1, number 2, number 3, just to try and organize them again. And you're going to have a little example above that they are going to be copying. So you're going to have your example above, and then you're going to let them fill in the square. I often find that children also really benefit when we teach them a little song, especially if a letter, and often if the first letter of their name is a little bit more difficult. We're going to teach them something that, like a rhyme that goes with this, that they say it every time, so it helps them to remember. So you can say like, B goes down, and then he does a round and another round. So you're saying them the sequence that they can say to themselves, and as they are writing, they're going to go, B goes down. You're showing them also that we start right up here in the corner. All of these letters, that's why I say they're good ones to learn in the beginning, because they all start at the same number 1 point, which is different to say like an O, which starts a bit differently. So we want to draw them a dot on the top so they know where they're grounding themselves, and then B goes down, then he goes around, and then he goes another round. And the same for E, really giving them the ability to understand the shape and the organization of the letters. And then once you feel like this drawing within the squares is something that they've really understood, then we're going to move on to them just looking at the word that you've written above and copying it onto theirs. Again, we want to give them a really clear focus point so that they can develop that muscle memory. Once your child has mastered writing their name, it's time to move on to handwriting in general. What an amazing thing to be able to teach our children that they can write for themselves. It is so empowering and so fun for them. You can check out the video that's on your screen now, where I walk you through everything that you need to know about handwriting and teaching handwriting. And I will see you over there.